Have you ever looked at the life you built and wondered why it feels like it's slowly falling apart? You've tried the gratitude journals, the morning routines, the therapist who told you to be gentler. You've consumed hundreds of hours of content telling you that accepting yourself is the first step to everything. And somewhere deep inside, in a place you share with no one, you suspect none of it is working. Today, I want to tell you about a man named Marcus and the brutal truth a ruined kingdom taught him. Stay until the end, because the twist in this story is the one insight the self-help industry will never sell you. Marcus is 38, a creative director at a mid-size agency in Austin, Texas, a man who believes he has done the work. Every morning at 7:15, he sits at his kitchen table with coffee he takes the same way. Black, 2 sugars, no exceptions. He hears the neighbors leaving through the thin walls, the sound of other people moving with purpose through their days. He opens his journal, writes 3 things he is grateful for, and tells himself in careful handwriting that he is enough. He has been doing this for 2 years, 4 months, and 11 days. He counted once on a bad night. At work, Marcus is talented in a way everyone acknowledges and no one depends on anymore, because his best work stopped arriving 18 months ago. His proposals are good enough, not sharp, not dangerous, not the kind that makes a room go quiet the way they once did. His creative partner, Diane, told him last spring with careful words, "You seem comfortable, Marcus, maybe too comfortable." He laughed it off because he had learned that discomfort was a signal to slow down and practice self-compassion. He had tried discipline, the 5 a.m. wake-ups, the cold showers, the goal reviews he abandoned after 6 weeks. He had tried therapy, which helped him name his patterns and develop a rich vocabulary for why he was exactly where he was. He had tried meditation, breathwork, a digital detox, a week in the mountains, a course on unlocking creative flow. Every attempt dissolved quietly, not with failure, but with the warm feeling that he had already done enough. His younger brother James visited in October, said nothing at first, looked around the apartment slowly, then asked one question. He asked, "When's the last time something you made actually scared you, man?" Marcus had no answer, and the silence between them lasted longer than any silence he had sat with in years. That night, alone at 1 a.m., Marcus held his coffee cup and felt something no journal entry could contain. It wasn't sadness and it wasn't burnout. It was something older and more specific than either of those things. It was the feeling of a man who spent 2 years learning to love his limitations instead of crossing them. It was the feeling, quiet and undeniable, of a kingdom losing ground while its king practiced acceptance on the throne. 3 weeks later, Marcus loses the account he has held for 4 years, not with an argument, just quietly, in a 15-minute call. The client says, with genuine kindness, that the work has been solid, but the agency they're moving to brings a hunger they've been missing. Marcus sits at his desk for 40 minutes after the call, not moving, the cursor blinking on a blank document he was supposed to fill. He drives home on autopilot, parks in the wrong spot, and walks to a park 2 blocks away he has never entered before. There is an old man on a bench at the far end of the path, unhurried, feeding pigeons from a paper bag. Marcus sits nearby, not to talk, just to be somewhere outside his apartment, his office, his carefully managed internal narrative. The old man looks over and says, without preamble, "You look like someone who just watched something they built stop working." Marcus says, "An account." 4 years. They said we lost our hunger. The old man nods once and says, "They were being kind. What they meant is that you lost yours." His name is Raymond, 71, former architect, a man who designed buildings in 4 countries and lost his firm at 52 to complacency. Raymond doesn't offer comfort or strategy. He offers something rarer, which is an honest account of what happened to him. He says, "I spent 3 years after my firm collapsed, telling myself I was healing, processing, honoring the difficulty." He pauses, tears a piece of bread, watches a pigeon take it, then continues in the same unhurried tone. "What I was actually doing was protecting myself from the shame of knowing I was capable of more and chose less." Marcus feels the sentence land below his sternum, where true things arrive before the mind can defend against them. Raymond describes what he calls the adversarial mirror, 20 minutes every morning, before the coffee and before the journal. You open a single document and write, for exactly 20 uninterrupted minutes, every way your current self is failing your capable self. Not your tired self, your capable self, the one you know exists and have been politely avoiding. No compassion, no reframing, no gratitude. Just a precise inventory of the gap between what you do and what you know you could. Do this for 30 consecutive days, Raymond says, and you will either change or understand exactly what is stopping you. And that is worth more. "What if it just makes me feel terrible?" Marcus asks. A real question, not a deflection. Raymond looks at him with the patience of someone who has already sat exactly where Marcus is sitting. He says, "Feeling terrible accurately is more useful than feeling fine falsely." Marcus starts that evening. Not Monday, not after the weekend. That same evening, journal pushed to one side. It is uncomfortable in a way his 2 years of self-acceptance practice did not prepare him for, and he goes for 23 minutes. That is the most honest 23 minutes he has spent with himself in longer than he can honestly remember. Here is what the story withholds until now. The part that changes everything about what came before. Marcus had not been practicing self-love because the content told him to, or because a therapist suggested it, or because it felt correct. Marcus had been practicing self-love because 3 years earlier, a project he believed in completely had failed in front of everyone who knew him. He had pitched a concept 8 months in the making, the most ambitious, most exposed work he had ever produced. And it was rejected, not gently, but with the specific cruelty of an industry that uses interesting to mean something it will never pursue. The self-acceptance, the journaling, the compassion practice. None of it was healing, not really, not at its root. It was armor, beautifully built, culturally validated, therapeutically endorsed, designed to ensure he would never be that exposed again. He had not been loving himself into wholeness. He had been loving himself into permanent, comfortable retreat. And Raymond, who had done the same thing for 3 years, recognized it in 40 seconds on a park bench. Week 1. The first 7 mornings are genuinely destabilizing in a way Marcus did not anticipate and cannot describe to anyone who hasn't been there. He sits at 6:45 a.m., opens the document, and what comes out is not insight. It is inventory, cold and specific and impossible to reframe. He writes that he has been producing work at 60% of his capability and calling the remaining 40% self-preservation. He writes that he has been choosing clients who don't challenge him because being unchallenged feels indistinguishable from being at peace. He writes that his brother's question has an answer, and that answer is 3 years ago, and he knows exactly why. By day 4, he is writing for 31 minutes without checking the time, which tells him where the real resistance lives. By day 6, the document is 4,200 words long, none of it comfortable, all of it undeniably true. Something shifts around day 10. Not in the writing, which remains hard, but in the hours that follow each session. He begins looking at his work differently, not with the soft approval of self-acceptance, but with the sharper eye of someone who has a standard. On day 13, he rewrites a campaign brief he already signed off on, not because anyone asked, because the first version wasn't good enough. Diane reads the revision and looks up from her screen with an expression Marcus hasn't seen directed at his work in over a year. She doesn't speak immediately. She just nods, the way people nod when something confirms a hope they had stopped allowing themselves to hold. By day 18, Marcus is arriving 40 minutes before anyone else, not because he scheduled it, but because he wants to be there first. On day 21, he writes for 44 minutes without stopping, and the last line reads, "The kingdom is still standing. Build." On day 24, Marcus pitches a concept to a new prospect. Not safe, not proven, the kind that requires him to be wrong in public if it fails. He delivers it standing, without notes, the way he worked before the rejection that changed how he understood risk. The prospect is quiet, then says, "This is the first pitch in 6 months that actually made us nervous, in the best possible way." Marcus drives home and sits in the parking garage for 8 minutes before going upstairs, not from distress, but from something he had forgotten. It is the physical, unreplicable sensation of having shown up as the capable self instead of the protected one. Day 30 arrives without announcement. 11,400 words of honest, uncomfortable, unforgiving self-accounting read back in one sitting. He does not feel proud in the way the self-love industry promises. He feels something more solid and less decorative than pride. The prospect signs, and the brief they send is the most ambitious project the agency has taken on in 2 years. He brings Diane in as creative lead, and the energy between them is something the rest of the office notices without naming. A junior designer stops Marcus in the kitchen and says, with the honesty that junior designers sometimes have, "Your team's work has teeth again." Marcus calls his brother and says, "You asked when the last time something I made scared me was. I have an answer." James listens, then says something that stays long after the call ends. "That's the guy I was waiting to hear again." He is not a changed man. Same wounds, same history, same rejection that broke something 3 years ago. But he is a man who stopped mistaking the armor for the cure, and that distinction changed everything measurable about his life. Marcus's agency wins a regional creative award for the campaign that started with that unguarded pitch on day 24. He still writes in the adversarial mirror every morning, sometimes 8 minutes, sometimes an hour, depending on what needs to be seen. He runs into Raymond at the same park on a Saturday, and Raymond asks how the kingdom is holding. Marcus pauses, not to find the right words, but to make sure the ones he uses are true. He says, "It's not finished, but it's mine again." Raymond nods, tears a piece of bread, and lets the pigeons take it. He says, "That's the only thing worth building toward. Not a kingdom that is complete, but one that is genuinely yours." Here is the principle underneath everything Marcus lived through, and everything you just heard. My friend, self-love, as it is usually sold, is not the beginning of growth. It is the most comfortable substitute for it. The sovereign who accepts every weakness without demanding more of himself is not a compassionate ruler. He is an absent one. And here is what most people don't understand. The contempt you feel for the gap between who you are and who you could be is not your enemy. It is the most honest, most actionable signal you possess, and the industry has spent years teaching you to silence it with kindness. So here is your challenge. Not next week, not when you feel ready, but tomorrow morning before the coffee and the content. Step 1. Open a blank document and write, for 20 uninterrupted minutes, every way your current self is underserving your capable self. No compassion, no reframing, no gratitude, just the inventory. Precise, honest, written as if your capable self is reading every word. Step 2. Identify the one area where you have been using acceptance as a reason to stop moving, and name it without softening the language. Step 3. Do one thing today, before this window closes, that your protected self would have found a reason to postpone until tomorrow. If this reached something real in you, leave the word sovereign in the comments. Just that word, and you will know why. Share this with someone who has been healing long enough that the healing has become what they're hiding behind. Because the question you started with, why does the life I built feel like it's slowly falling apart, has only one honest answer. It falls apart not because you failed to love yourself enough, but because the version of you that could rebuild it is still waiting to be summoned.